I'm Jonathan Hoffman, the Dibley Curator of Earth Science. Ever since I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a paleontologist. I manage and curate the Earth Science collection, and that collection includes paleontological specimens like fossils from the Channel Islands, as well as gems and minerals really from around the world. I spend a lot of time cataloging this collection, as well as going out into the field and collecting new specimens, particularly of fossils. Paleontology is not just all dinosaur fossils. We're focused on fossils or other indirect evidence of any type of life. I'd like to talk about mastodon teeth. This is a very wonderful specimen we have from our Earth Science collection. And a common misconception when people think about mastodons and mammoths is that they're very closely related. And in reality, mammoths are actually more closely related to modern elephants. And the way we know is by looking at their teeth. So this is the chewing surface of a mammoth tooth. And you can notice these white lines going across. Those are bands of enamel. And it creates this really nice kind of washboard style chewing surface, pretty much the same shape that we see in modern elephants. Compare that to this mastodon tooth, and you can see these are much more cusp-like ridges here. We used to think there was just one species of mastodon that roamed all of North America. This tooth was included in a study that figured out that there is a distinct species of mastodon unique to California. When we're taking a big picture look at past environments and past landscapes, we really need to know who the players are to be able to look at their different interactions and to know things about that diversity, the biological diversity of the past, really gives us the groundwork for being able to understand how that diversity is affected over time.
I am Vanessa Del Navas. I am the Invertebrate Zoology Collection Manager here at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. Oftentimes people don't really believe that I work with seashells when I tell them that's my job. It's not really until I have a way of showing them or really deeply explaining to them the amount and the mass of seashells or collections that we do have here. Here in the Invertebrate Zoology Department, we have millions of specimens in our collection. And our specialty are mollusks, which are things like clams, snails, cephalopods such as octopus and squid. Most of our collection is made up from the donations of private collectors. We are then able to make them accessible to both the research world and the general public. So once we have the shells in our possession, we then enter their data into a database available online for other researchers to access and request either more information or the physical shells themselves for them to do further research on. Because we have millions of specimens in our collection, we have quite the backlog, but that is really our driving focus as we want to make our collection as accessible as possible. People come and donate their collections that they've worked on throughout their life. One that we have, and one of the largest that we have here in invertebrate zoology, is that of S. Stillman Berry, who spent much of his life working on mollusks and specifically cephalopods, but also worked a lot on chitons and land snails. And in 1985, our invertebrate zoology department acquired Stillman Berry's collection. 50,000 lots of his specimens came to us at that point and really put our collection on the map as a specialized mollusk collection. It's really important to have certain data that's associated with these specimens and collections as they come in so that we can use them in our research collection. It's important that the specimens have a date as to when they were collected, as well as where they were collected pretty specifically, so that we can then use them comparatively with other specimens we have so we can see how things change over time, both habitat and within the species itself, and how things change geographically over time as well. So the specimen I have here today is actually the very first specimen in Stillman Berry's collection, and that's noted on his label as number 1. This specimen is Terebra maculata, or now known as Oxymeris maculata, in the family Terebridae, and these are known as auger or marlin spike shells. They are a marine, sand-dwelling, and carnivorous snail that is often found throughout the Indo-Pacific. We have numerous drawers filled with them here at the collection that are in much better condition, such as this one here. You can see it has a much more full shell and is in a better condition altogether. And this specimen here, Stillman Berry's first specimen, actually doesn't have any data associated with it really either. So on the label, we don't have a date as to when it was collected, and the locality information we have on it just says Indo-Malayan, which is a very broad area and isn't as specific as we would like. So typically this specimen wouldn't stay in our research collection, as opposed to this other one that I just showed you has very specific information that this was found in Nanakuli, Oahu, Hawaii. We have coordinates associated with it, and we know that it was collected in March of 1957. So why do we keep this specimen? Well, it has a bit more sentimental value, and that's from the back of the label that I would like to read to you. The back of this label says, "This poor battered shell is kept for reasons of sentiment. It has been in our family at least 110 years, longer than that if it traces to some seafaring ancestor. My father, Ralph Berry, born 1850, played with it when he was a baby, and I, born 1887, when I was a baby. I loved it, and it seems not impossible that the infantile impressions thus gained influenced the development of my lifelong attachment to such objects." So while this specimen doesn't have the data that we often need to keep it in our research collections, I think it's fantastic that we have that story for this specimen as to why Stillman Berry was so interested in these creatures and how ultimately they came to be here at the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. I love my job very much. It is my dream job, and it's what I worked towards for many years. And so really every day when I come to work, there's at least one moment a day when I think to myself, oh my gosh, I'm actually doing this, and I get to come to work and learn something new every single day, multiple times a day, which is one of my favorite parts about my job. So it's really just a never-ending process that I look forward to each day.
My name's Paul Valenish Scott. I'm the Curator Emeritus of Malacology. That's the study of mollusks. So snails, clams, octopus, squids. I specifically study marine bivalves. So that includes clams and oysters and scallops. I've been studying bivalve mollusks for, that actually is astounding me, about almost 50 years. Stumbled on to them quite by accident. There's so little known about these organisms that I really enjoyed every question I've found along the way, and also trying to find some of the answers. We're currently in the type specimen room in the invertebrate zoology department. And in this room, both specimens in fluid and also specimens that are dried, we have the actual specimens that scientists use to describe new species. So when a scientist discovers something new and then selects particular specimens to hold the name of that species. And some of these specimens, like this beautiful little oyster here, was originally described in 1864. Our type collection and our type specimens are actually the most valuable specimens in our collection. They aren't the ones that are necessarily the most valuable in currency, but absolutely the most scientifically valuable. While we have millions of specimens throughout the collection, the few thousand that are in this particular room are the ones that we cherish the most. We have anemones and hydrozoans, which are related to anemones. We have octopus and squids. We have flatworms. And on this side, the mostly dried mollusk specimens are of particular interest to me, and I work on different types of bivalve mollusks. One of the fun things that I've been able to do at the Natural History Museum is discover and describe new species. Some are named after people, some are named after places. Truly happy to my heart, I have 3 separate specimens in front of me here, named after my wife Lynn, so Krylovina linnae. That was done when I was putting together a large book on the bivalves of the tropic Americas. So basically from Baja to northern Peru. And I found a very unusual animal. So I shared it with scientists around the world saying, have you seen this? Do you have an idea what this is? And no one had ever seen it. No one even knew what genus it was, the level above species. So I was able to describe both a new genus and a new species, Krylovina, and then linnae after my wife Lynn. She's had 2 species now named after her and really enjoys telling people. It's a great cocktail party conversation, that's for sure. I was doing a review of the genus Pandora, which is right out of Pandora's box. It's a very challenging group. Certain groups are easy to understand and identify, and others are much less so. So I figured that was a perfect one to use for both my daughters, who are wonderful women, but also very complex. I gave it to them as a Christmas present. One Pandora Rachel A and the other Pandora Sarah A. They were late high school, so they didn't quite know what to think. But actually in later years, as they get older, they actually love that they have a species of clam named after them. So that's one of the great joys of discovering new things and then also describing them in the scientific literature. One of the questions that we frequently get is, why do you have so many specimens? So in our department, the Department of Invertebrate Zoology, we have millions of specimens that we can study. And the reason we need to do this is nature is not a one-off. We need to see the whole diversity of form and shape, how environment changes animals in their lifetime, so young organism versus one that's older. So that's one of the reasons why we need so many specimens in order to understand what's going on with a particular animal.
I'm John Johnson. I'm a curator of anthropology, and I've been working here at the Museum of Natural History since 1986, so this is my 35th year working at the museum. Anthropology is the study of our species. Some people ask, why is anthropology in a natural history museum? I think anthropology belongs in natural history museums because it's a mistake to separate humans out from nature. We interact with our natural world, and the natural world interacts with us, and it's important to study that interaction. A good part of anthropology is documenting how people use the natural resources. Archaeology gets involved in studying what the natural environment was in the past. Being an anthropologist here in the homeland of Chumash Indians, naturally, one of the things that we want to study is the Chumash cultural heritage, to learn about Chumash origins and see how culture changed over time and what were the factors driving cultural change. That's why we're interested in building collections and studying those collections. In maintaining these collections, it's our responsibility not only to disseminate the information, what we've come to learn with the general public, but also to be responsible caretakers of these objects for Native Americans themselves. And on a daily basis, we're interacting with members of the Chumash community today, and these collections also exist for them to preserve information about their past. We have some of the linguistic records of people who worked with the last native speakers of the different Chumash languages, people who spoke a language as their first language. Of course, today, Chumash Indians are using these linguistic records to recover their language and to get in touch with their ancestral heritage by learning that language. Some people think that it's just the objects themselves that are important, but it's not that. The information about each piece is the story that it tells. Sometimes they come to us and we preserve these because we know they came from our region, but they would be so much more valuable for scientific research and for Chumash Indians learning about their heritage if we knew more about the context in which they were obtained. But the ones that have been collected by archaeologists always include all that documentation. And this helps us reconstructing change through time. So having the information associated with each object is just very important. Back on New Year's Day, 1985, I was hiking with some friends, and I climbed up this big rock outcrop, kind of hopped up over the top, came down on a ledge, and there was a little cubby hole in the rock. And I thought, gosh, if I was going to stash something away, I'd put it there if it was me. So I poked my head in, and all I saw was just a sandy bottom of the rock shelter. So it didn't look like anything was there. I just stuck my finger in the sand and I hit something. I dusted aside the sand, and this corner of this basket is what popped up right here. A twined water bottle that was coated with tar on the inside to hold water. It's made from tule. It's twined from tule. The base of it was sitting next to it. And that's what this is. This is the base of that twined water bottle sitting right next to this piece. If you want to know more about Chumash water bottles, you can see some complete examples on exhibit in our Chumash Hall here at the museum. In order to make a basket waterproof, Chumash Indians would coat the inside of the basket with a mixture of tar and pine pitch. They would put the pieces of tar in the basket, and then these hot pebbles that had been heated on the fire, they would put them in the basket too, and then they would roll them around, and the pebbles would coat the inside of the basket with the tar pine pitch mixture and seal it. So one of the things we find archaeologically are these little tarring pebbles or basket stones that are left behind from making water bottles like this one. I wouldn't trade this job for anything. I do enjoy very much the friendships and interactions I've had with members of the Chumash community and with others who are interested in our region's indigenous past. You're not only managing the collections of the museum, you're also able to conduct research and add to our base of knowledge. I find that endlessly fascinating. I don't think I'll ever get tired of that.
I'm Jan Timbrook, Curator Emeritus of Ethnography. People always wonder what ethnography is, and it's a very fancy term that means cultural anthropology. I was the curator of pretty things in the museum collection in the anthropology department. So when I say pretty things, I mean things like Native American baskets, textiles, pottery, wood carvings, masks, all things made especially by Native American people. We focus on cultural materials from Western North America. Curation actually means just to take care of things. Taking care of them means identifying things that come into the museum, deciding where they came from, who made them, how old they are, describing them, and entering all of that into catalog records and a searchable database so that that material will be accessible. Because there's not much point in having things if people don't know what you have. Some of the science departments are relatively restrictive. They like to allow access primarily by authorized researchers doing academic studies. In the anthropology collection, we're not quite that strict. We like to be able to show collections to anyone who is interested, but particularly Native American people, usually by appointment. And also with them, I'm not a real white glove curator. Native people believe that the objects made by their ancestors are alive. They're like family members, and they need to have human contact. So if someone wants to pick up a basket, assuming their hands are clean and they're very careful, I certainly do not object to them actually handling these things. This is an amazing basket, and it's had quite amazing travels. This is the newest basket that is the most recently acquired in the museum collection. It's never been on display before. When the basket first arrived, the first people that we showed it to were some of our Chumash friends. Eleanor Arianes was the first, and she's the chairperson of the Barbareño Band of Chumash Indians. Ernestine Ignacio de Soto, who is an elder here in Santa Barbara, she does some weaving herself. And then Ernestine's niece, Samantha Sandoval, who is a really superb weaver, also came to see this basket. And it was a real pleasure and an honor to be able to share it with them. We know that the last Chumash baskets made by old-time weavers were made in the early 20th century. There were 3 weavers in Ventura, all of whom were gone by about 1916. And so there were no Chumash baskets being made after that time until recently. There are excellent Chumash weavers now. Those 3 weavers had a different style and usually made baskets that were a little bit less elaborate. We think it's very likely that this basket is probably made in the early 1800s, early to mid 1800s. So, you know, it's almost 200 years old. This basket has been from Texas to Northern California and back to Santa Barbara, where it was probably originally made. You know, if baskets could talk, it would have many tales to tell, I'm sure. A study was done in 1965 based on museum collections that were documented, and they determined what the distinctive features are of Chumash baskets, so you can recognize one across the room. They almost always have this principal band, this border that's about its own width below the rim. They have light designs, no big blocky black areas. They can be spiraling or radiating from the center like spokes on a wheel. The colors are, as you see here, there's kind of a pale tan or almost white sometimes. There's this golden color, and then there's the dyed black. So 2 of these colors are the natural colors of Indian rush, which we have growing here in the garden. And then in this case, the light tan could be the juncus, the Indian rush also, but in this case, it's actually sumac or sourberry. And then the black is also Indian rush, which is dyed. In this case, probably using acorns or oak galls in an iron pot to get the really black color. It has really distinctive characteristics. It has these little alternating dark and light stitches around the rim. Those are called rim ticks. So this is like a really classic Chumash basket. It has the main body zone designs and then these cool little fillers in between. The sort of X design is probably water strider. There's these little like animals that are called venaditos, or little deer. This is a really good weaver. The stitches are really even. She took a lot of time preparing the material before she ever started to weave. And that is really the most time-consuming part of basket weaving, is preparing the materials. And then the design is really well controlled. I mean, if you look really closely and you count stitches, you see there's a little bit wider space here than there is there, but you don't really notice that unless you look really closely. And so these other little scattered designs are sort of fillers to distract you from the fact that maybe the spacing isn't quite exactly perfect. But to me, that's what makes a basket really interesting. It has a personal, individual, unique characteristic. You can't do this with a machine.
My name is Krista Fay, and I'm the curator of the Vertebrate Zoology Department. I woke up a couple days ago, and it's 27 years I've been here. You know, I got hired right out of college. I had no idea. Being a museum curator wasn't even on my radar until I took a City College class with Jenny Anderson, the former marine biology professor. And she brought the entire class on a behind-the-scenes tour to this department. And I got to see all the animals in drawers, and I was blown away, had no idea museums did this kind of thing, and just really sort of fell in love with it, and continued on with my biology degrees at UCSB, volunteered in the museum at UCSB for a few years, and fortunately walked into a volunteer job here, and as most of us who are curators now, sort of just ascended the ladder, you know, moving up a little bit at a time, and suddenly you're here decades. Every day is something new that happens for a curator. You think you're going to have one project for the day? That never happens. You get a phone call and there's a dead dolphin on the beach. There's a mountain lion that was hit by a car. Wildlife Care Network had a specimen that they wanted to donate to you. I manage most of the vertebrate collections along with a couple other people. Nobody works in a vacuum here. Our vertebrate collections include things as small as hummingbird eggs, which are the size of a Tic Tac, up to giant marine mammal skeletons, including the blue whale skeleton that's up front. Eggs, nests, and bird skins, mammal skins, including coyotes, mountain lion, bear. We've got fish from the deep sea areas around Santa Barbara, which makes for a really good collection. We have material from foreign areas in our birdskin collection, including Ecuador, Afghanistan, and Madagascar, and reptiles and amphibians from primarily the local region. These are specimens that are kept like a library of books. Everybody has a data tag, what it is, where it's from, the exact date, and any other information about the collecting process. We got started as the Museum of Comparative Oology in 1916, and so I thought it would be the most fun to take a walk back through history with some of our oldest and most historic eggs. As you can see, everything in this drawer is huge, starting with North African ostriches, and this, it's an elephant bird egg. Elephant birds were endemic to the island of Madagascar. They're a recent extinction. They were seen in Danish missionary records up into the mid-1600s, and we're thinking that they probably went extinct due to exposure to domesticated animals being brought to those islands like pigs, chicken, other food items, and maybe some diseases could have jumped between those vectors. Their eggs are the biggest in the world. I'm sure that people traveling to Madagascar thought that this would be the most valuable treasure they could bring back to their home country, so I'm sure they took a lot out of the environment for that. It's a really special egg for us. It's the second elephant bird egg that was brought to North America. There was one of these eggs brought to the American Museum in New York, and since we were starting this fantastic museum of oology, our directors at the time and some of our benefactors, they heard about it and they said, well, we're starting the biggest egg collection in the world. We have to bring one to Santa Barbara. It's the biggest egg in the world, and it's just amazing from an extinct species. The other egg I have pulled out for this drawer is from a king penguin. And the reason I like this one so much is because it's got all the script writing from when it was initially collected. So this is a king penguin egg from December 25th, 1890. It was from the Kerguelen Islands. It was collected by Captain J.J. Fuller, and it says SCH, quote, Francis Allen. The Francis Allen was a whaling ship, and so it got down into the southern Antarctic. And probably with these whalers stopping off on a rocky, island where there's breeding penguins, this is a perfectly sourced protein. This would be easy to store, would feed a lot of people, and so we have a feeling that a lot of the people working on these whaling vessels were eating a lot of seabird eggs. Eggs were bought and sold through catalogs up until the 1920s, some of them bringing quite a pretty penny. Initially with birds back in the late 1800s, the hatteries, the fancy hat ladies, had those big egret plumes, and they really did hammer out some of the bird populations, taking them just for feathers and adornment. People should know that found natural history objects related to birds, particularly eggs, feathers, nests, or bird bones, and any marine mammal parts are all highly regulated by the federal government. It's illegal to have those in your possessions. They really belong in a museum to be carefully curated with the location they're from and the date. Private collections, fortunately, have started coming back into museum collections, and they're a really valuable resource for the scientific community. It lets us look back in time to what the environment and the animals were doing back 100 years ago, 120 years ago. Historically, I think curators have been thought of as a primarily male-dominated field. I think things are changing. I think there's more women in science and collections and research than there's ever been before, and it's really nice to see that demographic changing. People have this idea that curators are of a certain age and professorial in nature and sit in their office and just move specimens around and are kind of just experts in their field but inaccessible. And I think we're finally changing that old white man stereotype of what a curator does, shuffling through the dark halls and opening dirty boxes. I think we have a lot of really dynamic curators who can't wait to get science out to the public, lead tours, share our collections, and really inspire anybody who comes near our collections to be ambassadors to teach the community about what we do behind the scenes.